Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey-Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I am your webcast moderator. Today is Friday, August 8th, and we will hear new tools for evaluating fiscal impact of housing in New Hampshire. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the chat box, and I will do my best to answer those. For content questions related to the presentation, type those in the Q&A box. We will answer those at the end of the presentation during our designated Q&A. So please don't raise your hand. We don't do sound or audio or video. Just type those questions in the Q&A box, and I promise we will get to those. Coming up on your screen is a list of our sponsoring chapters and divisions for 2025. Thanks to all those participating sponsors for making these webcasts free and possible to members. Today, our host is the APA Northern New England chapter, and they have been a long-standing friend and partner of the webcast series, and we're glad to have you all here with us today, bringing this new tool to us. These are our webinars for August. I am scheduling into October and even November. So you can register for these and all of our upcoming sessions by visiting our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast, and many more are coming in the next week or two. So be sure to check back on our website so you can register for sessions. Today's session has been approved for 1.5 CM credits. So if you are AICP and in need of those CMs, go to planning.org, log into your My APA account, and then from there you can search by today's title or the event number, both of which you can find again on our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. If you're on social media, be sure to like us on Facebook. That's where I post any important date or time changes, when new sessions are available for you to register for, and a weekly reminder of what's on tap for Friday. We record all of our sessions and we post them to our YouTube channel. So head over to YouTube and type in Planning Webcast. We'll pop up along with our well over 500 session recordings, all available to you for free. So be sure to subscribe to our channel so that you get notified when I have uploaded a recent recording. Last thing on my to-do list for you all is asking you to join our mailing list. If you haven't yet, I send exactly one email a month. I promise it is one email a month at the top of each month, reminding you of what sessions are available for you to register for, and also what on-demand sessions are available for you to view at your leisure. Our on-demand sessions are all of those specialty CM required law, ethics, equity, and sustainability and resilience. So be sure to subscribe to our mailing list. You can visit our website or take a picture of that QR code and get registered. Actually, I just sent one out this morning. So if you're already registered for our mailing list, you know. Again, if you have questions for our panelists, type them in the Q&A box. We'll get to those at the end of our presentation. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and stop talking and turn it over to you, Noah, to kick things off.
Thank you so much, Christina. Hopefully you can see that. Everybody can see the slides.
Yep, looks good.
Great. My name is Noah Hodgetts. I'm a principal planner at the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs, which was the driver of this project. And I'm joined by our consultant, Stephen Madsen, who is a director at eConsult Solutions. And today we're going to be talking about the Fiscal Housing Calculator tool that we developed for municipalities in New Hampshire. So just a little bit of overview about New Hampshire for those that are not familiar. New Hampshire, as of July 1st, 2024, had a population estimated by the Census Bureau of just over 1.4 million people. The state has a land area, which numbers are probably small compared to many of the states that you're from, of just over 8,900 square miles, as well as about 350 square miles of water. The state has 10 counties, although it's important to note that counties and county government do not have a lot of powers in New Hampshire like most New England states. Most of the planning work, as well as any land development regulations, zoning is all done at the local level, spread across our 234 municipalities, which includes 221 towns and 13 cities. The 13 cities are shown in yellow on this slide. And municipalities range in size from as small as 68, population of 68 in the town of Hart's location, which is in the kind of northeast region of New Hampshire in Carroll County, all the way to 116,000, which is the capital down in the southern part of New Hampshire. Excuse me, not the capital, but the largest city of Manchester with a population of 116,000. And then there's also 25 unincorporated places up in the northern part of New Hampshire, predominantly in Coos County. So just a little bit finer detail on kind of where is New Hampshire headed in terms of population. So population projections, which were actually produced by my office, the Department of Business and Economic Affairs, with the help of our consultant, RLS Demographics, after the 2020 census, show that New Hampshire's population over the age of 65 is projected to increase until approximately 2035. That's that kind of darker blue line shown at the top, before leveling off and decreasing between 2035 and 2050. This is obviously going to have a significant impact on the type of housing New Hampshire needs to plan for, including the increased need for age-ready housing, including single-floor living with first-floor bathrooms and other accessibility features, including handrails and grab bars to accommodate especially seniors' kind of growing desire to age in place. So kind of with that population data in mind, how much housing is New Hampshire projected to need? So the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, which is our state's housing finance authority, like just like every other state has probably you have a housing finance authority in your state, projected in their most recent statewide housing needs assessment, which was published about 2 years ago, back in 2023, that the state needed to build just under 60,000 new units of housing between 2020 and 2030. So we're roughly halfway through that initial period right now, and a cumulative total of 90,000 new units of housing by 2040 to meet current unmet demand, keep up with the estimated population growth, which I detailed on the previous slide, and reach a balanced market by 2040 defined as a 5% rental vacancy rate and a 2% ownership vacancy rate. Now you'll notice on this slide, in addition to the totals in kind of that darker blue column, that kind of teal color showing the breakdown by tenure. So the housing projections were modeled to try to retain New Hampshire's current home ownership rate of 71%. Notably, this would require over 22,000 new units of housing for sale, affordable to households earning less than 100% of AMI. I point that out because it's really a market that's due to the high cost of housing right now in New Hampshire, where the state median sales price recently broke $500,000 for the first time. It's just really not a market that's really being served at all right now. And as we'll see in the next slide, examining building permit activity, in order to meet these housing unit projections, building permit activity would have to increase by 36%. So this chart is showing, going back to 1980, building permit activity. I'd pay less attention to the different colors and more attention to just the kind of general ebbs and flows of the graph, showing that like in much of New England, there was a significant spike in activity in the early to mid 80s. We got as high as permitting almost 18,000 units of housing per year. And then with the savings and loan crisis in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a rapid kind of drop in permitting all the way down to as low as like 3,800 units a year. And then we kind of saw this kind of steady increase all the way from the early 90s all the way into the mid 2000s up until the recession, where we were kind of topped out at permitting over 8,000 units of housing a year. And then obviously with the recession and the crash in the 2006, 2007 kind of region, we then saw another kind of precipitous decline in permitting, all the way as low as in the kind of about mid 2000 range. We have started to see some recovery in terms of increase in permit activity again. It's been a little bit of a slight dip the last few years, but we are now kind of averaging the last 4 or 5 years since the census, roughly 4,500 to just under 5,000 units of housing being permitted per year. Again, well off of what the state was permitting in the 1980s and even in the early 2000s. So hopefully that gives you some indication of kind of where building permit activity and kind of housing trends have been headed in New Hampshire. Over the last 5 years, the state has projected to have permitted roughly 25, just shy of 25 new units of housing, which is not an insignificant number, but it's still only 75% of the units projected as being shown as needed by the beginning of 2025, according to the statewide housing needs assessment that I discussed a minute ago. So with that overview of kind of the housing market and housing permitting trends in New Hampshire, I'm going to talk a little bit now kind of about some of the common refrains that we hear as planners here in New Hampshire when specifically multifamily housing is being considered, especially that has some kind of affordability or workforce component. And sure, these are probably similar refrains that you hear in your communities throughout the country. So the first is that any new workforce or affordable housing is going to increase levels of crime and cause other safety issues, and as a result, require an increase in the provision of public safety services. The second concern that we hear a lot of kind of concern about when we talk about multifamily housing and especially workforce housing below 100% of AMI is that it's going to generate a high number of school-age children that are going to increase school enrollment and as a result drive up school costs and drive up property tax rates. When in reality, New Hampshire statewide school enrollment is dropping. And there's actually been many school districts that have had to either close schools or consolidate schools with other neighboring municipalities. And then finally, just that another myth we hear a lot is that, in addition to schools and public safety, there's going to be a higher demand on other services like waste, trash and recycling, other provisions of other services the municipality might offer, whether it's other infrastructure demands, plowing costs for roads in the winter, what have it may be. Just any new housing, especially multifamily, is going to drive up municipal service costs and it will drive up, as a result, property taxes. So there have been many studies published by other New Hampshire institutions, including the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority and the University of New Hampshire going back to the early 2000s, which have tried to evaluate the effect of new housing on school enrollment based on school enrollment data from select communities, and then look at the resulting effect on property taxes. There have been some really interesting data that's come out of those studies. a lot of them have been focused on kind of just sampling from select communities, which makes it hard to do statewide analysis. There's also been some analysis, image on the bottom of the screen there, a few years ago, looking at land value per acre analysis for different housing types and uses in select communities throughout the state. Again, some really, really interesting data showing that a multifamily and mixed use development in higher density areas produce significantly higher assessed values than conventional strip development and your as well as conventional subdivisions and more sprawling areas of a municipality. So all of these kind of previous studies were definitely very, very informative in this project. And so the idea of, with all those studies and that context in mind, the goal of this idea of the fiscal housing calculator was to provide a statewide planning tool, which could help municipalities think about the fiscal implications of allowing different housing types of different sizes, especially for smaller communities where historically little new housing has been built. And as Steve will discuss in more detail, I just want to can't put enough of a fine point on it that largely due to data kind of limitations on the data that was available, this tool should only be used for illustrative planning purposes, and should not be used as a substitute for doing site-specific fiscal impact analysis um, by a planning board or other type of development review board uh, that they might want when they actually get an application for a new development. So with all that said, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Madsen, who's really the brains behind this, to walk everybody through the methodology behind the tool.
Great. Thank you, Noah. Like Noah said, my name's Steve Matson. I'm a director at eConsult Solutions. We're a boutique economic consulting firm located in Philadelphia. And we've done a bunch of work as it relates to fiscal impacts in relation to the development of housing, whether it's in New Hampshire, but more broadly across the country. Just to maybe talk a little bit about fiscal impact analyses up front, and then diving in maybe a little bit about into why some of the choices we made for this tool here in New Hampshire. Um, Fiscal impact analyses has a pretty long history, and I'm sure many on the call know this, a long history in the planning sphere as it relates to residential development. It has more recently become a topic in vogue as folks have begun thinking about smart growth and as the housing crisis has become a little bit more urgent for places across the country. Again, really what this tool is trying to do and what the fiscal housing calculator does is from a 10,000 foot level provide a bit of an illustrative view of what the revenues are that are coming out of a development chosen by a user that kind of interacts with a bunch of choices that the calculator provides, and then does a little bit of math and permutational work on the background to then land on those costs, applies those revenues against the expenditures that are applied to that development to create a net fiscal impact number, again, which is then representative of what that development would perhaps look like in this illustrative analysis. Um, Again, this is really a tool not necessarily meant to live as a site-specific tool. It's really meant to show folks how a development has property tax revenue attached to it, and at the same time has certain costs attached to it. Noah, do you mind going to the next slide? So before we dive too far into the methods, again, we just want to really talk about the limitations and the data sources that we relied on here. And this was something kind of important for us to do as we started working with Noah's team at BEA as well. It was important for us if we were to create a statewide tool to understand that there were going to have to be certain assumptions made, given that if you wanted a user to be able to kind of interact at that 10,000 foot level, a site-specific tool would involve a whole bunch of different variables and questions and wouldn't perhaps be accessible to a layperson. So the tool itself was kind of created with the regular everyday person kind of in mind, rather than planners such as ourselves on the call, and is really meant to kind of pull back to really just help folks interact again with the scale of development and density in the residential sense, and those expenditures that are kind of attached with folks as that fiscal impact analysis is kind of occurring. To speak a bit about the data sources, and this is both meant to help folks understand the data that helped us build it, but also to speak a little bit about the trends itself. We really tried to rely on public data sources, and that is both a pro and a con. Of course, it helps us understand the data as it currently is understood, right? We're trying to use the Census Bureau and ACS data to kind of create household estimates, household size estimates. To the extent that we could, we tried to rely on the most recent municipal budget data available through the New Hampshire Public Finance Consortium. New Hampshire, perhaps unique in that way, in that we were able to get municipal budget data for all of its diverse towns across the state. As Noah said, more than 200 towns and cities across the whole state. And we also were able to rely on assessment data and parcel data from the New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration. Again, this whole project would not be possible but for the availability of data at a certain level of granularity. So just kind of want to kind of state that as a flag. Again, just to talk a little bit about the cons on the other side of this is that in working with public data, you are working off of data that is naturally lagged. So you're not catching some of the trends that would really kind of be naturally impacting a fiscal impact analysis in particular. I say that because household sizes and households and the cost of housing is dramatically changing. Folks on this call definitely know that, but households are getting smaller. The number of children within each household is getting smaller. Obviously, that's having a little bit of an impact on the cost attached to each kind of school-age child, as well as the actual size of a home from a square footage perspective. So that would be having some impact on obviously the assessed values you'd be seeing in a development itself. Again, something that you could likely capture in a granular site-specific analysis, but not necessarily something you'd be capturing in the tool that we've created here, which again operates at that high level. Again, to kind of simplify this process and tool itself, we tried to really only work within budget figures that related to the property tax. There are certain fees that would occur within development that would likely impact the net fiscal impact on a slight level, kind of on the fringe, as you would look at those kind of expenses on the one side, and perhaps other fee structures that are specific to certain municipalities. We removed those from the analysis just to simplify this an additional level. We also did not necessarily consider the actual parcel location. Noah referenced a very well done analysis that was done by New Hampshire Housing that showed that land value per acre. Again, the big takeaway from that land value per acre analysis is that as you were in the more densely populated parts of a town, that land value per acre actually increases for the higher density and mixed use types of buildings. We definitely see that in the data as well, but of course, this tool is not allowing users to select a specific site location of where that parcel is. Of course, then just want to reference the data that Noah referenced at the top of this call as well, since we're working off of assessment data and parcel data of the current New Hampshire landscape. It does not necessarily reflect a tremendous amount of multifamily development across the state. Obviously have a whole bunch of single family parcels to rely on to create kind of a data set that allowed us to create the averages that kind of are built into some of what we will end up showing. But the N count for the multifamily properties in the state was not very large. So just kind of a flag there. So we did have to work on some smaller N counts for creating some of those averages on the multifamily side. And I know folks on this call know this, but as we were kind of digesting how to best represent this information to a lay a lay front end user, uh, there's always kind of that misinterpretation between assessed values and sale values, which obviously there's a little bit of a difference there in terms of what you're looking at, and from value, sale values obviously being a little bit higher than assessed values. Noah, feel free to go to the next one. Great. Again, so fiscal impact analysis, what are we trying to do here? Again, just trying to evaluate the revenues of a development and the public costs associated with that development. Uh, Going into this, we were trying to create, again, a statewide tool, a tool that would allow users to kind of choose a municipality, choose a type of development from a housing perspective that meant a single family home or a multifamily home, or again, that middle density home, something that looks like a duplex, quadplex type of development. And then also creating a subtypology within those age-restricted units, market rate units, workforce units. That meant going into the assessment data and kind of identifying and flagging those types of different properties, classifying them, creating averages and assessed values per square foot for each of those typologies. On the municipal side as well, to make sure that we were accurately capturing the different costs associated with households as they were kind of entering into these developments. Again, that's really what's driving that public cost. We're looking at a per capita expenditure estimates to kind of apply against the people inside the development to kind of land on that fiscal impact analysis. Like Noah said, New Hampshire has a very, very broad and diverse set of municipalities that are existing throughout the state. Three very large towns, as well as a bunch of suburban locations, a large number of rural towns, and a number of towns that are kind of existing kind of in the northern part of the state, where you would have the White Mountain Range. Again, some of those places being more seasonal locations or ski towns, some towns just being simply more remote, much less dense than the traditional town where you would have a central business district or a downtown area, and very limited development, much larger parcels compared to the parcels you would see in a suburban town outside of Manchester, or the really kind of the smallest parcels that you would see in the densest parts of the state, really that Manchester, Concord, Nashua area. So to just give a little bit of a view into what those dollar figures attached to the square footage look like, just pulled up on the bottom right-hand part of this slide. The single family assessed value per square foot looked like $195, and the multifamily one a little bit higher. Middle density, interestingly, was the highest per square footage assessed value per square foot in the assessment data. That's true across each of the different municipalities and municipal typologies that we created. Again, just to speak a little bit as to how those municipal typologies were created, we tried to keep municipalities together to create those per capita expenditure estimates for towns that had similar service profiles, similar sizes of population, similar levels of population or building density, just to make sure that as we were creating those averages, since again, we were creating a system that was kind of at that surface level, 10,000 foot level, making sure that those numbers are really on an average basis and comparable to other municipalities that are being grouped together. The next slide here just kind of gets into, again, what do some of those municipal typologies look like, and what are some of the land sizes, again, attached to those parcels, like what were we seeing in the data. Again, to create those expenditure profiles and municipal typology profiles, we were looking at 7 distinct municipal typologies, again, grouped on the basis of population density, tax-based considerations to really kind of understand and create a profile and per capita estimate on the expenditure side that was consistent across each respective municipal typology. Um, on the typology, on the land size, I spoke a little bit about this before, but as you can see, there's kind of that scale of density. So again, as folks are kind of interacting with the tool itself, the tool is kind of selecting a land size just on the basis of the size of the median land size parcel for the typology that the user selected. So whether they selected a town like Concord, which would be again in that municipal typology one, they would get a smaller land size. If they chose a town in municipal typology 7, they would be looking at a median land size that is significantly larger, given the basis of the area they selected to be most representative of just a random site that might be possible for development. Again, just a little bit more on some of the data behind some of what we were doing. What we tried to do, again, using the parcel data and the assessment data, was to create a median value per acre. Again, we did not allow users to select a specific location, so this is really on that median basis for each municipal typology. Uh, Given for to kind of make this a fair kind of hypothetical question for a front end user, we kind of came at the question from a development perspective that this question on development would involve the the reality that there is some difference over the replacement of a piece of land that could be developed for residential purposes, and the relevant zoning that may be impacting what allowable type of property could be built there. So there's a bit of a what we're calling a value over vacancy. That's different for each type of for each type of housing typology that's been selected again, so that creates a little bit of a scale of difference on on the land value that's attached for each type of housing typology. And then again, the table on the right-hand side is speaking to those figures that were on that earlier slide that was speaking to the assessed value per square foot. Again, this related to the size of the building that the user is creating through the calculator. So again, this was a tool really meant to be operated by lay users to kind of interact with the set of information that would be behind a fiscal impact analysis. So what we wanted folks to do and have the ability to do was to look up their town, try to understand the differences between the density choices that could potentially impact their town, or the choices that a site may have inside their town, and then think about the other housing needs that they may be facing to kind of build a development that perhaps addresses some of those needs. And if they were to build that from a high level, what would that look like? Would it be a net fiscal impact? Would it have a net positive fiscal impact? Would it have a net negative impact? What is that impact on the property tax rolls altogether? Again, so how we built this was really almost like a matrix in a way, kind of creating those different values on the basic variables that kind of go into that revenue side here, which we're kind of covering in this slide. So what the flow chart is showing here at the top hand side is that there's for a user a municipal selection. Then there's a housing typology selection, a subtypology selection, and then a development size selection. So what the user has access to when they open up the tool is a selection of all the different towns and cities inside inside New Hampshire, and then after you make that selection, uh, again, that first selection, then attaching a land size and land value to the parcel or the hypothetical parcel that the user is creating and development that they're creating. You then get to choose your type of housing. Again, that assigns the actual building value for the property. That total figure together when they've chosen a housing typology, a subtypology, and a development size. Again, that unit count, that being 1 to up to 200 if you make that selection on multifamily, creating a total assessed value. That total assessed value is then multiplied against the local property tax and local school property tax rate unique to the municipality selected by the user. Together, you do that multiplication to get the estimated property tax revenue, which is really the revenue we're trying to use and evaluate to better understand what it will look like and measure up to against the public costs that will be explored on the expenditure side, which we cover in the next slide. So again, and just to maybe take a step back and go back to that first slide where we were talking about the sources, it was important for us to use the best available information to understand the size of a household and the cost of public services in a town. So again, because we had access to the municipal budgets for all of the towns across the state, which was really a great luxury. I know a lot of states don't necessarily have the ability to do that, but we were able to kind of create a marginal cost per person based on density and the cost of municipal services in a town to create, again, that per capita figure, which is then applied against the number of people that we estimated to be inside that development. Again, based on household estimates out of the American Community Survey. We also used cost per pupil estimates, helped and provided by through data from the New Hampshire Department of Education to help land on that cost per pupil at the local level, making sure that we're kind of capturing that the number of school-age children that are attached inside the household, and then creating that joint figure again to create the total expenditure for each unit, then multiplied against the number of units in that development, scaled to create that figure that then measures up against that revenue side figure that we landed on the previous slide. To speak a little bit about just the broader trend here, of course, household sizes are changing. They're changing rapidly. They're getting smaller for most places across the country. So the tool itself is really capturing the data and population of New Hampshire as it currently exists. So great opportunity here just as a flag to remember that this is really just reflective of the current snapshot in New Hampshire. A couple of unique features that we applied here for this fiscal impact analysis. You would, in a site-specific analysis, you may not see this. In some instances, it may be appropriate. But since, again, we were working at that statewide level, we wanted to make sure we were capturing the differences between vacant land and non-vacant land, and making sure that we were properly reflecting the impact that zoning and allowable uses has from an economic perspective on that land. Again, creating that kind of value above vacant land, reflecting and creating a little bit of a premium for those multifamily properties because you can get larger economic returns off of that type of land. On the density discount, this was something we built out of a literature review that we did that kind of spoke to a few different sources that spoke to the impact of population density and building density on the cost of public services, generally showing that the marginal cost of public services generally has a very subtle decrease with each additional person or each as density kind of increases. Given the size and population of New Hampshire towns, this actually could be somewhat dramatic in some of the smaller towns by even adding one multifamily development. Uh, One of the slides earlier had a reference to kind of that average size of a town in New Hampshire for some of the typologies that we created, and there were a couple of typologies where that population or the median population of a town was really no higher than about 1,000 people. So even adding 100 or 200 households to a municipality like that could really have a significant impact on the density. So we added a very conservative discount on that marginal cost impact on the expenditure side, again bringing down what that may on that expense side. So it's not necessarily as significant as you're building with increased density. And then the subdivision assumption kind of speaks to the fact that for the model, we mostly assumed that a single development or a development that would rely on one parcel was likely to be infill. Anything larger than one unit or one parcel of land would require larger land and perhaps require additional public service costs. So we applied a little bit of a premium there to kind of reflect the that possible cost there. So when you open up the tool, you see before you see this results here, you have a set of selections on the left-hand side, and we'll kind of do a demo at the end of this to kind of show everyone how this works. But what the tool ends up spitting out is the product you see on the right-hand side of the slide here. We have a fiscal impact analysis completed at the development level, then broken down by unit. Again, just that total figure divided by the number of units selected by the user. And then again, that taxpayer fiscal analysis, which is the essentially an analysis that tries to help the user see what this would how it would impact the the property tax payment for the median price single family home in the town that they selected. Again, assuming nothing else changed. In reality, obviously budgets change all the time. You'd probably in a development not see this impact on property taxes until the next year or even 2 years. But our goal was to kind of show if you were to add this property back to the tax rolls and nothing else was to change, what would that impact look like? And the figure that you're seeing on the right-hand side here, just to kind of interpret it for folks as we get through this call, this would show that there was a 17% decrease on their property tax payment for each unit that was added by the development, leading to whatever the other impacts were. So we'll go ahead and demo some of this, and I'm going to pull Noah back up to kind of help us lead us through it. But this is what the tool looks like from a static point. Noah's going to switch over screens to kind of pull it up live.
Hopefully this should be loading for folks. Let's see. Steve, are you seeing that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. And I will, let me see if I can also put the link in the chat. Whoops, we went back. Sorry, everybody. Hold on. There we go. All right. So this is what it will look like when you first open up the tool. And we'll click start here. Sorry, I'm looking away from the camera. I'm going between two screens here. We're gonna just look at 3 communities for now. If we have time and folks have questions about others, we can certainly look at other communities. But it's gonna start with the capital, the city of Concord. And you can search for a community with the tool one of 2 ways. You can either just type it in, or you can also go down the drop-down list and just find the community name that you are looking for. So once you've selected your community, the tool is going to automatically populate a couple of figures. The current population estimate from the ACS 5-year estimate, the total housing stock, as well as the median income. And then the next option after you've selected the municipality you want to view is the number of units. Today we're just going to look at 20 unit projects. We'll start looking at 20 units, 20 single family units, so a 20 unit conventional subdivision. And we'll just for now look at market rate. So we do all that, we put all those inputs in. The tool estimates that there will be a net negative fiscal impact of approximately $9,100 to the city of Concord, which on a per unit basis is negative $456 per unit to the city on an annual basis. For the owner of a median price single family home in Concord, that would be a hit on their tax bill or an increase of 0.0 or 4 cents per unit per year. So as Steve mentioned earlier, we really saw the highest assessed value by housing type for the middle density, the 2 to 4 units. And that's really clear here where you go from that net negative fiscal impact to a positive fiscal impact, net positive fiscal impact of almost $46,000 for 20 units of middle density housing, which on a per unit basis is about $2,300 per unit. Now on the taxpayer fiscal analysis, instead of seeing that number being red, denoting an increase on a property taxpayer's bill, on average, for the owner of a median priced single family home in Concord, they'd now see a reduction in their taxes of 18 cents per new unit of these 20 units. And that's on an annual basis. Before I move on to looking at multifamily, I neglected to mention this number you're seeing on the lower left quadrant of your screen, the estimated housing need for Concord by 2040. That is the number from the that all those numbers feed back into that 88,000 or approximately 90,000 new units of housing that New Hampshire needs by 2040. So in addition to the statewide housing needs assessment that was completed in 2023, the state's 9 regional planning commissions also completed their own regional housing needs assessments, which produced municipal level housing estimates as well of how much housing is needed in each community by 2040. So now we move from middle density to multifamily, and you'll see that multifamily is still net positive, but is not nearly as fiscally advantageous according to the tool as middle density housing. You go this 20 units of multifamily according to the tool in Concord would have a net fiscal impact, positive fiscal impact of $2,600, a net positive impact per unit of $130, and a net positive impact for the property taxpayer of 1 cent per unit. Now, here I think it's important to point out that as Steve discussed earlier, because we're not doing a parcel by parcel analysis, this is assuming a kind of set level of density for the entire land area of Concord, and really for that matter, all the units for the same number of density for all multifamily units in the entire municipal typology for Concord, which is the first municipal typology. So admittedly, you could probably do, and I will get back to look on the number on the density, but you know, like most communities, you'd be able to do a lot higher level of density. significantly higher level of density on Main Street in downtown Concord, where I'm sitting, than you could do in kind of the that kind of the sprawling, more kind of outside area of Concord, outside of our urban growth boundary. So that's just something to keep in mind as kind of when looking at these numbers. The next community we're going to look at is the town of Boscawen, which is just to the north of Concord, which is a lot more rural, but is also kind of, as need for new housing increases, has been seeing a lot more pressure for new housing as well. And Boscawen is one of those communities that is, can point to as saying, they've really welcomed new housing. They've made a lot of changes to their zoning ordinance. They're really trying to adopt kind of, removing regulatory barriers to housing. Really one of those housing friendly communities in New Hampshire, which has been recognized as housing champion. So Boscawen, if we start again, was just looking at single family, 20 units of market rate single family. Interestingly enough, has a net positive fiscal impact of almost $24,000. So that's unlike a negative fiscal impact we saw for the city of Concord. Boscawen has a lot less infrastructure. There's some water and sewer on kind of the southern kind of border of this town with Concord, but largely does not have water and sewer. So, this tool is assuming if you potentially added some infrastructure, there may be some gain in infrastructure efficiency as well. That, for example, the city of Concord and other larger communities are not going to necessarily get that benefit from, because they're already largely kind of built out in terms of infrastructure. If we move from 20 units of single family to 20 units of middle density, you'll see that the net positive fiscal impact jumps to $67,000, which on a per unit basis is roughly $3,400 per unit. And the net positive fiscal impact to the property owner who owns the medium price single family home in Boscawen is, significantly larger number than what we saw for Concord, almost nearly $3 per unit on their property tax bill. Now, this also is going to, is being driven as well by not only that net fiscal impact, but obviously Concord and Boscawen have different tax rates. Concord has a relatively higher tax rate. I'd have to check what the Boscawen's tax rate is, but that's also kind of playing a role here too. And then if we go to multifamily, we're at 25.6, nearly $26,000. So that's still a little bit higher than what it would be for doing 20 units of single family. So there's still some more benefit from doing multifamily compared to single family, but not like that stark contrast we saw in Concord. But then again, still middle density is still showing to be the most fiscally advantageous. And on a per unit basis, that's still $1,300 net positive fiscal impact for each unit of multifamily in Boscawen. The final community we're going to look at right now, and if we have more opportunity, we'll look at some others and we can play around with the tool a little bit more, is the town of Plymouth, which is up north in Grafton County. It's a college town, home of Plymouth State University. It's it does have a downtown with an urban core. Again, is also really interested in building more housing. Has also been recognized by the state as a housing champion. And so again, we'll look at 20 units of single family. Here you're seeing a number again of back to negative $25,000, so a hit of $25,000 to the town of Plymouth for 20 units of single family, of which on a per unit basis is negative $1,200. And then finally, that number on the bottom for the owner of the medium priced home in Plymouth, that would be a hit on their annual property tax bill of 72 cents. So their annual property tax bill is going to go up by 72 cents every new unit of single family. If we go, or notice a similar theme here for middle density, you know, we've seen big numbers. This is one of the larger numbers, positive $103,000. That's a benefit of $103,000 to the town of Plymouth to do 20 units of middle density housing. On a per unit basis, that's nearly $5,100 per unit, and 2.95, almost $3 per per unit in reduction in property taxes for the owner of a medium priced home in Plymouth. And then finally on multifamily, it's still a net benefit to the town, but it's less. It's just shy of $33,000, $1,600 per unit, and a net benefit to the taxpayer. Again, assuming nothing else changes in the budget. The budget isn't reduced by to account for this additional revenue of, or I should say increased rather, of 94 cents per unit in savings to the taxpayer. So we're going to stop there for now. I will also link before we get too much further to, I think I have over here, this is the in-depth kind of user guide and methodology for folks. And with that, we can open up to some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Again, folks, if you have questions, just type them in that Q&A box and we'll do our best to get to those. I do have a couple links that I put in the chat box for all of you attendees. So feel free to click around and let's dive into a couple questions here. Okay. The first one here, what about the overall gain factoring in construction costs? That is, even though some of the annual hits are negative, there may still be an overall profit.
Yeah, I can answer that one, Noah. Yeah, I think it's very fair to say that, this model is not kind of necessarily attracting what would come after or associated, like the other positive, like the positive things associated with the addition of people, right, and foot traffic that could be associated with increased business activity in a downtown. If you were to create some form of a residential development in a downtown urban core, you may see some additional foot traffic that's driven through the addition of new population. But yeah, since we're really just operating in a world where this is just the sandbox is just the four choices that we've given the user, we try to keep it just strictly on the development itself rather than just like the additional activity that would be driven from the economic activity itself.
Could we say that the data that is used to create this program, could we say that the data itself is fairly static? And at what point, can you just talk more about at what point does the data need to be updated, or do we have to consider other metrics to compensate for things? How does all that work?
The data is definitely static. It's not moving. You would want to redo this every couple of years. The big thing that is driving the two things that are really driving this are obviously the assessed values. Reassessments in New Hampshire occur pretty frequently, I think. And Noah, you're the New Hampshire expert. You can say whether I have it right at, I think, 5 years for every town, but every town has a different 5-year span. So it's kind of a moving target for all the different municipalities across the state, but it's supposed to happen within every 5 years. And then obviously, as I spoke earlier, the trends on household size are changing pretty dramatically, as well are, just the values of homes themselves. So as you're thinking about those changing assessed values and the changing sizes of houses and buildings, you would want to really be concerned about maybe changing that every 3 to 5 years. It's not something you would want to do every year at this type of level for this type of tool, just because the data lags and you don't really see that much of a kind of jump year to year for certain places. That could be true maybe for some of the smaller places. If you were to do just one town, this is something that you could do and make it a little bit more even site specific. Um, and as you go in on the granularity, rather than trying to include as many permutations, as Noah said, to kind of control for all of these things, you can kind of include more of the unique aspects of each place if you're going down to that smaller level. And it's something you could do, year over year. Um, I think that kind of any other bit of that, Christine, that
I think that, no, I get it. That
okay.
makes sense to me. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Next question. And if you didn't know, now you do know that I'll always end up asking about money and how
Yeah.
much something like this cost and where the money came from. So I'm going to go ahead right out and ask where that came from and if there is cost just on a day-to-day to keep up with it, knowing that, every couple of years you need to kind of reinvest some time to update the numbers on the back end, but just from a day-to-day function, how that works. And then the second part of that question is assuming no funding constraints, which these are my favorite kind of questions. How would you further refine the model? So greater granularity, for large multifamily developments like units, bedroom count, construction style, or like further analysis on the municipal level regarding the infrastructure available, or anything related to that nature.
So,
Let's talk
Steve, let me
about
take the first part of the question.
Yeah.
So, the project was funded with American Rescue Plan dollars, ARPA dollars, that New Hampshire had as part of its uh, state and local recovery fund kind of portion. Ballpark for the project was just south of, I believe, about $150,000, somewhere in that range. Yes, Steve, does that sound? Yeah, from memory.
I thought it was going to be way more than that.
Yes. Which again, Steve can talk about,
Way
if we
off.
had if we had infinite money, what could you do? And kind of some of the decisions that had to be made given the budget we did have.
Yeah, so you could make this as this could be a very expensive endeavor. There's no ongoing cost to maintain it. The beauty of Microsoft Power BI is that if you create the data set itself and have it live on, it's something that most government organizations or entities have as, accessible to them. You may have to pay like a monthly fee for Microsoft BI, which I think is like $200 a month, maybe less than that, depending on what like enterprise version you have. But there's that kind of fee of hosting BI itself. The tool and the data is all created on kind of like our end. We have our own Microsoft Power BI license. We created the data again using all that public data. So we tried to use, nothing that included pay-fors. If you had infinite money and infinite options, you could create something for every town. Again, probably not a reality in New Hampshire or other northeast adjacent places where there's, you know, uh, 200 something towns in New Hampshire, 500 something in Pennsylvania, 500 something in New Jersey. So there are certain places where it would be very difficult to do that at scale with a constrained budget. Um, the first place I would suggest folks to maybe think about if you have more budget than that and wanted to create something like this is to maybe think about again I think the bedroom count suggestion is great, Christine. Right now we're really just kind of operating in a world that most things are kind of like a 2 bedroom average, just given where the data was. Obviously, again, with trends that's going down. So that's something where you could see maybe 5 years from now that average in New Hampshire will be closer to a 1 bedroom. There are things like that you would maybe want to think about. On the other end of that, To go back to the earlier question, you would maybe, if there's enough literature to support it, and I think there probably is, you could speak about some of those other impacts that we're not capturing here that are associated with residential development that generally have shown a positive fiscal impact to towns. So there are certainly, I think, ways to expand on it from that perspective to kind of capture just beyond just the development itself of, property tax revenue versus per capita expenditure.
Okay. Next question, and maybe this is a Noah question starting out, and Stephen, if you have comments on it, but how's it going? Is it working well? Are communities using it? Are they finding it useful in, determining their future housing needs? Is it helping them get a better grasp of the infrastructure needs and population increases, and how's it going?
So I think that's a really great, really interesting question, Christine. We've gotten a lot of interesting feedback. I think for people that and communities, especially smaller communities that may never be in a position where either they've had a big development or they've never really contemplated what the municipal fiscal impact of a development might be. I think this tool has been particularly helpful. And that was really kind of the intended audience for the tool to begin with. Those smaller communities that are beginning to feel more housing pressures, to see, maybe there is some fiscal benefit. It's also been really interesting to hear, we've gotten feedback from some other communities, larger communities, that have undertaken municipal fiscal impact analyses, and especially looking at kind of developments again in downtowns, where they really do have more of that granular data, to Steve's point, of, number of school children being generated from new developments, kind of how many, kind of pretty good data on how much, new dollars are flowing in property taxes and permit fees, user fees, and other utility fees from that development, that they're saying, well, it's a really interesting tool, but we're looking at our numbers and they're a little bit different, and they don't always line up. I think that's a fair criticism. Again, as we said, with this tool, and as Steve said, we had that unlimited funding where you could create a customized kind of municipal analysis and really kind of look at those variable densities, and really also adjust the number of school children by housing type, by municipality. You'd probably see a lot more kind of differences um, in the estimates. Again, because of the nature of this tool being such a high level planning tool, you know, the understandably, the feedback we've gotten in some of these denser communities, where the tool just doesn't contemplate, being able to do, say, 50 to 100 units per acre, I think is fair.
I am going to put on the hat of me being a volunteer board member on my local review board, that reviews, plan developments, things like that. And I think to myself, man, it would be great to have a tool like this that I could look at, so that when we have our first review meeting and I have 150 residents sitting before me saying, the schools are going to be overloaded, the streets are going to be overloaded, our infrastructure is going to be all messed up, everyone is going to flood, their backyards are going to flood, everything's going down, you can't do this development, we can't have this. I feel like perhaps a tool like this, being able to use some of these numbers to kind of quantify and make scenarios a little more real, would be useful. Are you aware of situations yet where this has happened? Where communities are able to take this data and this information and, turn it into something usable for the community?
So this just hit the streets in
A month ago?
late May, about
Right?
a month or two ago. So, actual hearing, like, I don't actually have a lot of kind of anecdotes of like where this is actually being constructively used. I think to some degree, that is the hope. But I would also say again, guarding against what we said earlier is, if you sit on your development review board and you actually have an application in hand, I think high level for planning, this can be useful, but we wouldn't want somebody to say, all right, here's our 40 unit multifamily, or application for 40 units of multifamily in Stevensville. And this tool says it's going to have a municipal impact of positive $3,000, and now say that's the number we're going to go with. That's again, that's not the
Right.
intended. By that point, you're already pretty
Far
kind of
in.
far along in that exercise. The goal here is to be like, all right, we're working on our master plan. We're working on the future land use section. We're looking at our zoning amendments for next year and saying, okay, should we contemplate, allowing more multifamily housing in a district? If we did that, what could be the potential fiscal impact if we were to allow more multifamily housing?
I think just as an addendum to that, and this is more from my experience of trying to show folks how Noah and his team have been thinking about this as we've like tried to help people understand if this is something that they want to pursue, is that it's a wonderful conversation starter. Um, and really what I think the struggle has been for a lot of folks that we end up working with is that folks don't know how to really engage with it or to present it in a way that is accessible or not immediately causing people to bring like pitchforks to the next town meeting. So if anything, I think it's been useful to kind of help people be like, oh, if we just say, and really talk people through the method, it's like, well, there's a cost and there's a revenue. There's sides, there's pieces to all, to this kind of complicated puzzle, but when you break it down to its simplest components, it's really just trying to understand the current trend on where population going and where cost is going. So, yeah, I think it's been certainly useful from that perspective.
Yeah. Okay. A couple specific questions on the calculator. The first one is, does this tool factor in inflation or changes for larger housing developments that have a phased build out? Does it factor in the cost of street capacity to accommodate travel to and from the new units? And does it factor in cost of multi-municipal services such as public transit, private water, sewer operations?
Yes and no to
That's
some
a
of
lot of questions.
those. Yeah.
All at once. That's a lot of
I
questions.
think the simplest way to think about it is that we looked at the available municipal expenditures that were attached and available to us from the New Hampshire Public Finance Consortium data. So if a town had those public services or shared services, some of that cost may have been pulled in. If it was not, and it seemed like most towns did not have any kind of shared services, some did. We tried to group those towns together. So depending on where a town was, some of that is maybe being captured, given just on the basis of what that per capita expenditure ended up looking like. I'll say on the inflation effect, um, no, right? Because this is a static tool. It's not necessarily thinking about the trend of where the budget will go, or as Noah kind of said before, where how the budget will change in reaction to this proposed or hypothetical development re-entering the rolls. Where you would usually either see like a budget increase or a budget decrease. So yeah, yes and no.
Mhm. Okay. One more detail-y question on the calculator. The dollar value outputs in the model seem awfully low for a medium price single family home. Has the model been done for median, middle, and medium multifamily unit impacts? In any event, there seems to be so many adjustments being made that revenues are slightly exceeding or slightly not exceeding costs.
Yeah, so we looked at median, that median assessed value figure for buildings for the whole like the whole data set. So every parcel was pulled into the data set from across the state. Again, restricting it to more recent builds. So again, we only used construction that was within the last 20 years to try to be reflective of the more recent trends in what assessments have been. Again, since New Hampshire has that rolling kind of like 5-year reassessment period. Um, so those are as good as they get. And as I said, I think especially on like the multifamily side, the trend in New Hampshire has been that there's really not been a lot of multifamily development at all. There's been some, and certainly there hasn't been as much multifamily development as we understand it today. Um, even in the last 20 years. I'm thinking of like those mid-rise or higher rise types of multifamily developments that you would see certainly an even higher assessed value per square foot. Again, associated with like the type of economic returns that you can get out of a larger type of building and density. Um, so again, I think some of that, again, the model itself is a bit captive to previous trends of what's going on and doesn't necessarily capture the most recent data. Like a building that was delivered in like the last 2 years may not necessarily have like its information in like the assessment data that we used. So all that to say is that these things are rapidly changing, and I would say it probably is those values probably are low on the multifamily side. So if anything, I would say they're really conservative, given where we ended up placing them.
I'm just going to add there because I know this has come up several times. Is that, again, we had to base it off the data we had, right? So, you know, Steve has alluded to the public finance consortium data that we had that our New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration maintains. That did have that statewide data as well as the assessed valuation data. But again, that was what I think 2023 or 2024 data that we used on the assessed values. But some communities, like we said, may have not reassessed in 5 years. So that means in reality, for some of those communities, that's 2019, that's really 2019 assessed values, which, yes, the world has changed a lot since then. And then on top of that, again, as this being a planning tool where we've broken down communities into these 7 municipal typologies, we compared them in terms of kind of population, density, to some degree, socioeconomic characteristics, but there are still significant kind of range in terms of assessed values within the groupings of municipalities within each typology, which is going to affect kind of skew that average of assessed value for each housing type within the typology. Steve, I don't know if I'm explaining. I don't know if I'm going to add anything.
No, yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think too, just to kind of reference one of the studies that we kind of at least leaned on a little bit was that New Hampshire housing study with the assessed value per acre. And again, that's true as you kind of move out to these places that are outside of the urban core, those assessed value per acre numbers are going to be lower. And that's true across single family, multifamily, middle. Those assessed values really fall off when you get further out and further spread from kind of the population centers of New Hampshire.
One last question before we wrap up here. And this is a question that I asked both of you during our tech check before we went live today, which is, we're all talking about AI and what it can and cannot do. What are your thoughts on, if the sky's the limit, being able to incorporate AI into this process to make it either more tight of a product or, making it not static or, sky's the limit. Thoughts on incorporating that?
I would love a tool that's not static, where there are more variables that you could interact with, and it was kind of computing live on the basis of like the types of variables you want to pull into the equation. Maybe possible through some very advanced and perhaps more expensive R or Python scripting, and or web hosting. But in you know in the way that we used it, I think something I would maybe want to think about or think about doing is maybe like doing some form of a clustering analysis that's more not, I'd say, just there may be a variable that we didn't consider, right? We looked at a lot of variables when we were putting together the municipal typologies. Was there a regression we did not run that is relevant? Maybe, but we didn't want to run 100 regressions. So there is, I think, that kind of like scale of efficiency when you're doing the type of research on the AI stuff that maybe there is something we missed, and there's an area where we can like maybe like tighten up the municipal typologies, and given how much they kind of impact where the results land, that's kind of where my head would go first.
Right. And for me, we didn't really go over it, but right now the model kind of you either have to select 100% market rate or 100% workforce or age restricted or not age restricted. And part of that is because on the back end of the tool right now, for each typology and each housing type and each number of units for each housing type and each typology and each municipal typology, there's kind of a set kind of determination of what that all the calculations have really been done in the background. Theoretically, if you were using AI, you could, AI could do kind of more of the on-the-fly calculation, and you could start to kind of play around with, I want to do a mixed income project of say, 20 units multifamily workforce, 40 units market rate, 60 unit market rate, or I want to do, I think there was a question about a multi-phase development. I want the first phase to include 20 units of single family market rate. Second phase, I want to do 100 units multifamily workforce or whatever it is, and really kind of start to play around with what is the net fiscal impact when you do different income banding, you mix housing types together, so on.
Okay. Well, this was a great conversation. Thank you. And thanks to the Northern New England chapter for hosting today's session. Don't forget to log those CM credits. Register for all of our upcoming sessions, get information, links to our YouTube channel, everything you need you can find on our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. So with that, Noah and Stephen, thanks for joining. We appreciate you. Everyone, have a great weekend, and we'll talk next time. Bye-bye.